Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. This will be episode 179, so definitely getting up there. So these are covering some of the wonderful mods people have been making, and we use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So we've got a very interesting assortment of animals today. We've got a few mammals, we've got a few birds, and one extinct one, in the subspecies. It's a very interesting assortment of animals today. So we're starting off with our exhibit animal for today. This is by Tosco DS. We have got the Congo Dwarf clawed frog. So let's have a look at these cute little guys in there. He's on land. Let's see if we can find one in the water. See if we can get him in the light there. Oh, there's an albino one, I think. I'm trying to find one in the light where we can get a good look at him. There we are. That's a little cutie, little friend. So this is Hymocharis Chinus Bordigeri. So this is also known as a Zari dwarf clawed frog, or the Congo dwarf clawed frog. So these guys are a species of frog in the family Pipidae, and they are found in Nigeria, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, and the Central African Republic, and the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. Presumably it's sized the Republic of the Congo, but it's not been recorded there. And it's a common species. It is quite common throughout its range, so it is considered least concern. So luckily it's doing pretty well. So in terms of entomology, its kind of specific name, which is Borghetti's, honors the German zoologist Oscar Borghetti. If you say that, Borgheri. Probably saying it completely wrong, but it is what it is. So in terms of its description, this aquatic frog you can see comes some sort of like grey or brown, speckled with these kind of darker spots you can see on the body there. So yeah, Tosco's done a great job of reconstructing it. The head is narrow and tapering, and it actually lacks a tongue and eyelids, so that's quite interesting. The legs are quite long, and there are claws on the hind feet, hence the name clawed frog. So those little feetsies back there will have claws on them. Females can get to about 35 millimeters, or about an inch larger than the males, and the trypanum is twice as large in males as in females, which gives the males the appearance of a swollen head. So it kind of gives them a big round head. So you can see the males and the females hanging out at the bottom there. The little guy chilling. So males also have a large subdermal gland on the hind part of their forearm, which appears to be a white spot near the armpit, and this gland will enlarge during the breeding season, so that probably helps with pheromones and things like that. So in terms of their habitat, these guys are aquatic frogs, and they generally occur in still, shaded water in lowland rainforests and in pools of slow-flowing rivers. And they are something that is kept in captivity, so they are bred and sold as aquatic pets under the name African dwarf frog, but they can also include other species. As pets, they can live peacefully with other fish, though the tanks should neither be large enough to pose a threat to the frog, nor small enough to be food for the frog. So as long as they're a similar size, and they can do all right. They are not an especially demanding species, can be kept in most standard setups. Seeing how much they breathe air to survive and can escape the tank, they must not be too tall and be well covered as a must. They also feed a diet of food such as aquarium fish, so things like live frozen and freeze-dried bloodworms, other worms, brine shrimp as well, and they're not picky, but overfeeding can quickly lead to obesity. So pretty much the same as most animals. You overfeed them, you are going to have issues with obesity. Yeah, we'll have a quick look. No, that's not what we want to look at. So we're going to have a quick little looky-loo at the Zoopedia and see if we missed out any other information. So principles, yeah, there you go. Yeah, we mentioned that. The main tell is if you have a true African dwarf frog and not the other species, like all of them, they have webbing on both the front and back legs, and their eyes are positioned to the side of the head rather than the top. And the sound's also more curved, so you can kind of see that definitely on that one. While they may escape to land, given they are often skittish, they won't survive longer than 20 minutes in low humidity areas. Oh, that's interesting. And the coloration barriers between olive green and brown are covered in dark black spots that tend to hang at the bottom of the pool where the colour blends better. So that makes sense. Yeah, really, really cool. Cute little guy. Another Tosco DS mod. I really love seeing all these really cool exhibit mods, because there's just so many cool little animals you get to talk about. But anyway, let's carry on. So next up, we've got a mod done by Great Cakes. We've got the black-footed tree rat. So let's have a look at these cool guys here. So this is the black-footed tree rat, uh, Mesobimus goldie, also known as the Digintamuga. I'll say that. We'll probably butchered that, but whatever. They're actually one of the two endemic rodent species in the genus, along with the golden-backed tree rat. And they're actually one of the largest species of rodents or mice in Australia. So there's been a lot of research in these guys to actually aid the captive and natural management of these guys as they can be held in captivity for conservation purposes. Anyway, the tree rat is, you can see it's got a greyish brown coat, which is shaggy and coarse with a creamy white underbelly. So you can see that little white underbelly going on there. They have large eyes, large ears, and a long tail with a brush of white hair on the tip, as you kind of get their name. And you can also see they've got like a lot of black fur around their feet where they get their name. Especially around the back, because you can see that's all black. They grow to a mass of about 830 grams, or about 29 ounces, and have a head to body length of about 250 to 308 millimeters, or about 9 to 12 inches, with a tail length of about 100 to 130 millimeters, or about 3.9 to 5.1 inches. And there are 3 subspecies recognized based on slight coloration variation and minor differences in skull and things like that. But actually, research with the population genomics actually agree with this delineation with the subspecies, so that's interesting. So there's one species, subspecies found in the Queensland. The Gulf of Cabinera is separated from this, and other mainlands with Northern Territory. And there's a third subspecies found in the Melville Island in the Northern Territory. So kind of the mainland one and then a couple islandish ones. In terms of its behavior, the black-footed tree rat is either solitary or nocturnal, although multiple individuals have been seen denning in the same hollow log and things like that. Individuals are also semi-arboreal, but they spend their time on the ground foraging and moving between trees. And they typically shelter in tree hollows and in eucalyptus trees during the day. And individuals will typically have a mean range of about 40 hectares, although it can vary quite a bit. They are a folivore and frugivore, so they do eat a lot of fruit and fruit and foliage, but they supplement their diet with invertebrates, so things like termites and mollusks they will eat as well. So let's see if we can find a little baby to talk about. Here's a little baby. I want to have a look at a little baby because he's quite cute. So, in terms of their distribution, they have a range extending from the savannas of the Cape York Peninsula down into the Kimberley of Western Australia. The habitats include things like tropical woodland, or open forests that are suitable for the tree rat, although they can persist in more complex coastal vine thickets and closed forests. It is not common to many areas and many geographical regions show that they are declining. And one study in the Northern Territory suggests that they have actually declined about 30% from their pre-European distribution, and the breadth of the occupied ecological space has declined by over 40%. And the same structural reserve species, higher rainfall, they prefer that. Genetic estimations of effective population trajectories show that most populations are undergoing severe declines, although the population around the city of Darwin actually appears to be stable. And the global estimated population is about 30,000, that the distribution is probably known, and they could be far more sparse. So hence, of all these sharp declines, it could probably introduce predators and things like that. They are considered vulnerable, but not like completely at the risk of extinction, because as mentioned, there are some stable populations. I'm not trying to look at that. I want to have a look at that guy. No! Stop that. It's because I'm too close to it, I guess. But they're really, really cute. Look at that cute little guy. Another great cake spot. Great cakes always knocks it out of the park. So we're going to move on from Australia and to Europe. So we're going to have a look done by Gaboy and Genora Pizza. Gaboy does a really good job with their mods. So Gaboy's given us the European ground squirrel, also known as the European solsook. So these guys are a species of squirrel, and they're among the few European species in the germ Spermophilus. And like all squirrels, they're made of a rodent order, so they are rodent. And they can be found in Eastern and Central Europe, from southern Ukraine to Asia, Austria, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, Serbia, Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, and north as far as Poland, but their range is divided by the Carpathian Mountains. So in terms of their size, they're about the size of a brown rat, with adults measuring about 20 to 23 centimeters, or about 8 to 9 inches, and weigh between 240 to 340 grams, or 8.5 to 12 ounces. They have a slender body with a short bushy tail, and they've got short dense fur which keeps them warm. It has a yellowish grey with a tinge of red, and a few black patches along their body there. As you see, the underside is kind of pale and more sandy. The large dark eyes you can see are placed high on their head, and they have small rounded ears, and their legs are quite sharp, so these are all adaptations for digging. The males are also slightly larger than the females, otherwise they look pretty much the same. The European ground squirrel has a shrill alarm call that will cause all others in the vicinity to dive for cover. They also make various chirping and growling noises. They also sometimes can be confused with the spectacled ground squirrel, which grows in Poland, Romania, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. But the species has dark brown fur spotted with a white thin tail and lives in areas with coarser vegetation, so that's the main way to tell them apart. So in terms of evolution, they're actually more closely related to the Anatolian ground squirrel, or particularly to the Taurus ground squirrel. The earliest remains have been found about 226,000 years ago, so during the Pleistocene. They were actually a lot more higher ranging, so they were limited because obviously with the ice age and that they're actually more restricted to places like the Danube, and a large part of their current range was still inhabited by a close relative. But then when the relative went extinct, they were able to take over that niche. So it's one of those things, ebb and flow. So it's quite interesting. So as I mentioned, their distribution habitat, they can be found in Asia Minor, Austria and Poland. They became locally extinct actually in Germany and Poland, but were reintroduced in 2005, and some of the animals actually doing well. So part of the reason they are endangered, we'll get to, they have very specific habitat requirements. So they need short tuff in order to dig through short turf to dig over through the tunnel systems. They also find this on steppes and in pastures, on dry banks or sports fields, parks and lawns. And these conditions are lost with changes in agricultural practice, converting grasslands into forest or arable land. So there's not enough habitat for them to actually burrow in. So in terms of their behavior, these are actually colonial species, and they're mainly diurnal, so they do live in groups and come out during the day. They excavate a branching system of tunnels that can be up to 2 meters deep with several entrances. In other places of the home range, they'll dig unbranched bolt holes which they can hide if there's danger. If alarmed, it emits a piercing whistle, which can be heard. And these predators can include domestic cats, weasels, foxes, and some species of prey, bird of prey. They typically will feed on grasses, other plants, flowers, seeds, cultivated crops, insects, and occasionally the eggs of ground nesting birds or on their chicks. And there's actually a study in Bulgaria that showed by early autumn they spend most about 8 to 11 hours a day outside their burrow in the midsummer, but they reduced to 7 hours in autumn. And rather, over half the day was spent foraging, but other activities observed were kind of vigilance, exploring, running, sitting, grooming, digging, scent marking, and vigilance. And during the winter, it stops at the entrance of its burrows and hibernates, with a nest of dry vegetation. With each individual occupies a separate chamber, and during this period, the body temperature will drop to about 2 degrees, and the heart rate will slow to a few beats per minute, and like it's doing now, he's having a good sleep there. And during hibernation, they may wake up briefly for a few days and use up the fat reserves accumulated during the summer, which is about 90% of their stored body fat. And in Bulgaria, typically hibernation will last from September to March. So we'll have a look at the cute little baby while we talk about the breeding. So, because I did see a little baby there. Look at how little these little guys are. There's a little baby. So, after emerging from hibernation in the spring, mating will take place between April and May. The gestation period is about 26 days, and about 5 to 8 young are born deep in their chamber. Like other, species of rodents, they're born naked and blind, and their eyes open at about 4 weeks of age. And the female will feed them for 6 weeks, and as soon as they're ready, soon after they're ready to leave the burrow. And they reach maturity the following spring, and they will live for about 8 to 10 years. So they are a little bit longer lived than actually a lot of rodents, which is interesting. But still not super long. But yeah, they're quite cute, aren't they? Definitely a big fan. So they are sadly listed as endangered. Have a look at the albino one, because I managed to find an albino one. Let's see if we can find it. Where is she? Because there's an albino one that I managed to find. She's underground. Alright. So this is our albino one. Anyway. There we go, that's better. So in terms of their status, they are endangered by the IUCN, so their population has been trending in the last 10 years diminished more than 30%. And the southern and northwestern and northern parts of the range are the most severely affected. And the main threats is typically the conversion of grassland into cultivated fields or forestry, and the abandonment of grasslands and its reversion of like unsuitable tall grasses, which is not suitable for the species. Urbanization and road building has sometimes like fragmented these species, but they prevented them to recolonizing the potential spaces. So they do need a little bit of help in that regard. Yeah, it's still a really, really cool animal. I think Good Boy did a really good job, General Pizza for coding it, but Good Boy did a great job, making it. And it's nice to see another cool little species, out there to talk about, which is brilliant, of course. So, next up, this is done by Good Boy and General Pizza, but our next one is done by Nicholas Lion Rider. So we've got the Shira moose, also known as the Yellowstone moose, or the Wyoming moose. So this is one of the 4 subspecies of moose, or the Shiras moose. So there also is mentioned known as the Yellowstone or Wyoming moose. So they are the kind of lowest ranging subspecies. So you can find them in Yellowstone, Wyoming, Idaho, places like that, and including Nevada. So they're the newest habitat in Nevada. So they're the most southern of the subspecies, and they do live in like the same typical habitat. So things like boreal forest and mixed forest. They're not too different from the typical, Alaskan moose or Canadian moose that you think of when you think of big moose. But these are the ones, if you're like Colorado, Wyoming, these are the type that you're going to see most often if you're in the US, unless you live in Alaska. Be a really, really cool animal. I think forgot this Saraski, I think it said. And they're also the smallest, so that's part of Bergman's rule. So often animals that live in lower latitudes will be smaller than those of ones in higher latitudes. So since it's the most southern ranging of all the moose, it makes sense that it's smaller because it doesn't need to conserve so much body heat. And I think it gets about 350 kilograms maximum. But yeah, still a nice little moose. Other than that, kind of their anatomy is not too different. They're just considered subspecies. That's the main way to tell them apart. So these guys are quite cute. Definitely a cute little guy. And then we have a cute little baby. That's awesome. So yeah, not too much to say about this guy, but it's not too different from other moose subspecies. But yeah, we'll keep on keeping on. So next up, we've got a mod done by Monsoon. I know that we love Monsoon. So the moose was done by Nicholas Lion Rider, and then Monsoon's made us a really cool duck. So we've got here the common eider. So the common eider, Stomateria mossissima, also known as the St. Cuthbert's duck, or the Cuddy duck, or Cuddy's duck, is a large sea duck that ranges from the northern coast of Europe, North America, and eastern Siberia. It breeds in the Antarctic and sometimes some northern temperate regions, but winters somewhat farther south in temperate zones where it can form large flocks on coastal waters. So in terms of its taxonomy, it's a little bit confusing. So it was considered in the genus Anas along with other ducks, but it has been put its own genus since then. With its name, the genus name derives from stoma body, so body wool, and mossilaris means very soft, so it's got very soft wool, pretty much. And there is some subspecies recognised. I'm not sure how true they are, but yeah, we've got a few different subspecies. So they are considered the largest of the 4 species of eider duck, and they are the largest duck found in Europe, but it's exceeded in America only by the smatterings of the Muscovy ducks, which only reaches North America in the wild state in southern Texas, so in most Texas, and sometimes South Florida. So it measures about 50 to 71 centimeters, or about 19.5 to 28 inches in length, and weighs between 0.81 to 3.04 kilograms. It's about just under 2 pounds, and then just under 7 pounds. So there's a bit of variety there, and it spans about 80 to 110 centimeters, about 31 to 43 inches across the body, across the wings. And the average weight for 20 females in North Atlantic were about 2.21 kilograms, or about 4 pounds 14 ounces, while 32 females will average 1.92, or about 4 pounds 3.5 ounces. And you can see it's characterized by that quite bulky shape. So you can see it's quite bulky one. We're looking at the male now, but I'll have a look at the female soon. So the male is kind of unmistakable. You can see it's got this black and white plumage and this kind of green nape or green back of the head, as you can see. But the female is kind of still quite brown, very similar to other species of duck. Often the females are just drab brown, but still look very characteristic. They can still be really distinguished because they've got a different look to them on the basis of their size and their head shape. The drake's display is a strange, almost human-like au, is this display called, where the hen utters a hoarse quacks, or like Horus quacks. And these species are often readily approachable, so that's another cool little thing there. Let's have a look at the male again. So there is some slight subspecies differences, minor differences in plumage, like the drakes have the European and North American and Asian or West North American ones, some subspecies, There's also V. nigra, which is thought sometimes to be a different separate species. The species is quite specialized, they actually dive for crustaceans and mollusks, and their favorite food is mussels. The Eider will either eat mussels by swallowing them whole, with the shells are then crushed in their gizzards and excreted. And when eating a crab, they'll actually remove the claws and legs and eat the body in a similar fashion. They're also quite abundant. Their population is estimated to be about 1.5 to 2 million in both North America and Europe, but they're also large and unknown numbers in eastern Siberia. And there's actually a particularly famous colony that live in the Faroe Islands in England, and they were subject to one of the first ever bird protection laws established by Saint Cuthbert in the year 676. About 1,000 pairs still nest there every day, where they get the name Cuddy's duck from Saint Cuthbert, I believe you say that. And also in Canada's Hudson Bay, there were important Eider divers were reserved in the 1990s, but local populations due to quickly changing ice flow patterns. So that was something that really worried them. So these changes in patterns probably traps the ducks or, prevents them from getting certain prey, things like that. But yeah, quite cool. In terms of social behavior, they are colonial breeders. Let's have a look at the babies. Look at these cute little guys. How adorbs. So they are colonial breeders. So they nest on coastal islands and colonies that can be as less than 100, but up to about 15,000. Female eiders frequently exhibit a high degree of natal pliopathy, which means they return to the breed on the same island where they were hatched. And this can lead to a high degree of relatedness between individuals nesting on the same island, as well as development of kin-based female social structures. And this relatedness is likely paired to the role as evolution of cooperative breeding strategies among the eiders, and examples of this breed include laying eggs in the nests of related individuals, or crashing, where female eiders will actually tear out to share the work of rearing ducklings. So it is cool that they're, pretty good parents. They like to share it around, they help each other out. And, girls got to stick together. But yeah, really, really cool. I really do love these ducks here. They're really, really beautiful. Let's see, I'm just having a swim there. So that's the common eider. Done by Monsoon. Really, really good job there. Monsoon always just knocks out of the park with the awesome mods that they do. So I've always got to compliment that. But next up, we've also got another one. We're going back in time. We've got a prehistoric animal done by Monsoon. We've got Dromornis Stirtoni. So let's have a look at this really cool animal. So I'm going to go into about the genus, and then we'll talk about, the species itself, because there's 4 different species. So Dromornis, these guys are a genus of large and quite enormous prehistoric birds that lived native to Australia. So they're only found in Australia. They lived from the Oligocene into the Pliocene. And the species, you can see, is quite large and flightless, and they're kind of very similar to, emus and, ostriches, but they're not that closely related at all, as I get into. They were likely herbivorous browsers, and the males of the largest species, this is the largest species, Dromornis Stirtoni, may actually be a contender for the largest and heaviest bird in the world, which is interesting. So these guys were actually originally considered a species of moa, but then they were actually found to be their own different genus. And the type specimen was found in Queensland, and the genus and family names has been kind of referred to as the Mitharung, which is distinguishes birds from the giant emus. The Mitharung paramole is the Aboriginal word for giant bird, so that's kind of their name, the Mitharol. And there had been a few different species described. There's about 8 genera, 4 genera and 8 different species. So Dromornis has 4 different species, and then the rest are in genera. So if you heard of the animal, another famous example would be Dromornis, which lived right up until the end of the Pleistocene, so humans would have seen them in Australia. that is a member of the Dromornis. And as I mentioned, they're sometimes known as the Strathon Matarung, so also known as demon ducks. So the description, as I mentioned, they're quite large birds, and even though they look like giant emus, they're actually not closely related to emus and ostriches, which are ratites. These guys are actually believed to be more closely related to anseriforms or galliforms, so they're more closely related to chickens and ducks than they are to kiwis and cassowaries and emus, which is quite interesting. And it's a great example of convergent evolution because, we have emus living in Australia and cassowaries, but these guys were also quite big and they were, not that closely related to each other, which is quite cool. And we'll also talk about Dromornis Stirtoni, which is among the largest birds. It is rivals the elephant bird from Madagascar. That could be, its own species. It could be, just as heavy, if not heavier. They're probably just not as tall, but yeah, there's also quite strong sexual dimorphism. So what's interesting as well is that because a lot of anseriforms and ducks, the males are the larger sex, so the males are larger than the females. But with ratites, the females are larger than the males. So things like moa, like the female moa may be like 3 times the size of a male, but then it's kind of the reverse for these guys. So typically it's the male is the larger one. So you can see we've got quite a big male there. So the particular species we're talking about, so this is Stirtoni, also known as the Stirton's Matarung or Stirton's Thunderbird. So these guys were a large bird. They were believed to be about 3 meters tall and weigh about 500 kilograms, and is widely thought to be one of the largest, if not the largest, avian species to exist. So Patricia Vickers-Rich first discovered the remains of this guy in 1979 in the Alcota fossil beds in the Northern Territory of Australia. And there's large amounts of fragmentary material found in their location, and was also proposed to be, it's the kind of Rich proposed it to be the specific of the fellow paleontologist Reuben A. Schritton, who is an American who undertook quite extensive research into these Australian taxa. So it's great that he had a species named after him. I have to say, he's quite a beautiful guy here. So as I mentioned, a large feathered bird, grew over 3 meters tall, and actually thought to have exceeded the giant moas of New Zealand as the tallest birds, though that's obviously debated. And they are also from the family Dromornidae, as we mentioned before. The weight of these animals would have been quite large. There was actually a book about the magnificent muntarungs that looked into these guys. Analysis of these bones, as I mentioned, also shows sexual dimorphism. So a full-grown male, this size, would reach between 528 to 584 kilograms, or between 1,164 to 1,287 pounds, while females would be about 441 to 451 kilograms, or just under 1,000 pounds. So there's a strong sexual dimorphism there. The disparity of robustness was interpreted by researchers to be evidence of the biology, so the female, incubating, pair bonding, and taking care of the babies, more similar to that of anseriforms, since they are more closely related to ducks and chickens than they are to emus and cassowaries. So it's thought to be as well. So it's, as you can see, it's opposite. So the males are quite big, while in ratites the females are bigger, except for, as I mentioned, except for ostriches. That's a bit of a extreme case. One of the ways you can tell them apart, you can see they've got quite a large and deep jaw, lower jaw, and they've got a narrow, deep bill that accompanies about 2/3 of the skull. The front of the jaw was used to cut, while the back of the jaw was used for crushing. So, comparison of prosocrania with the near-complete cranium of Dromornis plateri or Bullocornis, so the head to be about 25% larger, which is quite cool. We'll actually have a look at the female now, because I think we've had enough looking at the big boy. We'll have a look at one of the girls. So you can see they're a little different there. I quite like that. So this bird as well had stubby wings or reduced wings because it was flightless. However, while it was flightless, there was a strong development between the bony crest and the tubosities where the wings were attached, so allowed them to flap their wings. And they also had large hind legs, and they seemed to be quite muscular rather than slender. So you can see they've got quite thick legs, which would have been quite good supporting their weight, but also, being able to kind of be capable at running. So birds like emus, depend on their slender legs to reach higher speeds. These guys being heavier, they probably had to be, quite a bit stronger. And they're also characterized by large hoof-like toes. You can see they're almost superficially hoof-like, so big and round, which is quite interesting. And have convex nails rather than claws. And further typical of flightless birds, they do not have a breastbone. And as I mentioned, there's 2 forms of unearthed specimens that seem to consider to be strong sexual dimorphism. So as I mentioned, the females are smaller than the females. and that seems to be a lot like with other birds as well. And osteohistological analyses also suggest that they were extremely K-selective, so it likely took them over 10 years to reach adult size, and after which they reached skeletal maturity and its growth rate kind of slowed down. So it did take them quite a long time to, get to be big adults, and then you have the cute little babies there. So it takes them about a decade or 10 years to get to these big sizes. I'll have a look at this cute little guy anyway. We'll talk about the habitat. So in terms of the habitat, the only recorded fossil is from the Alcota fossil beds. So as I mentioned, they are from the Miocene, so between 24 to 5 million years ago. And at this time, there would have been open woodland with seasonal rainforests, and they would have lived around the late Miocene to early Pliocene. They would have lived with other species of Dromornis, so such as Dromornis, but also relatives of actually emus, ostriches and emus, so things like that. So they did kind of look like that. We'll have a look at the male again, because I like the colours on him. He's actually really cool. I like that. Anyway, so this concentration of Dromornis species actually kind of found that they were waterhole tethering, so they would have believed to have all come from, these waterholes and come to these waterholes in which they die, which is interesting as well. And it seemed they live in a very interesting kind of like assemblage of animals. They live with other like browsing marsupials, and they were kind of the apex herbivores. The early conceptions of the bird was thought to be, quite fearsome, and actually proposed that the larger males would have aggressively defended their range from competitors, other males or herbivores, but also predators. So they could have been quite cranky, how swans could be quite cranky. Imagine like a half-ton swan, 600 kilogram big duck, that's definitely going to hurt you. Yeah, typically they are widely accepted for being herbivores. That has been deduced by the various features. So you can see it's got does not have a hook on its beak. Also has a wide hoof-like, feet as well, rather than talons. So it is pretty considered pretty, safe to say that it was a herbivore. And lastly, also they looked at the amino acids within the eggshells of the species to deduce that it was a herbivore. Despite this, however, there actually are various indicators that this bird may have been carnivorous or omnivorous. But the size and muscularity of the bird's skull and beak also suggests they may not have been herbivores. No source of vegetable food in the environment would have required such a powerful beak. In recognition of varying opinions, it has been widely accepted that while they occasionally scavenged or eaten small prey, they were mostly herbivorous. So they will most likely, as I mentioned, they could have, taken a small animal every now and then, but could have been mostly herbivores. So maybe omnivorous might be a better way to put it. But yeah, really, really interesting. There also could have been extinct plants that they may, we don't know about, that could have required those big beaks. But anyway. So this is, the Dromornids actually lived for quite a long time. They lived from the Miocene right until the end of the, Pleistocene, with Dromornis, dying at the end of the Ice Age, about 60,000 years ago when the other Australian megafauna went extinct. But it has been proposed there may have been a lot of reasons why these guys have gone extinct. So things such as, changes in tropic morphology, they got outcompeted, although they suggested, because they took, such a long time to breed, the few young that were produced took time, so because they breed so slowly, they were very vulnerable to changes in the environment or predators. So, that could have really risked the, chance of going on. But yeah, really, really cool species. Another great cakes mod, we love a great cakes mod. So we've also got another great cakes mod coming up. We've got one from, that's not extinct, but we've got one that's a really, really cool animal. We've got the Harpy eagle. So this is what I'm quite excited to talk about. So this is the Harpy eagle, or Harpera harpinara. So these guys are a large neotropical species of eagle, also known as the American Harpy eagle, to distinguish it from the Papuan eagle, just sometimes known as the New Guinea Harpy eagle. So they are, as I mentioned, they were considered Vultura harpina, and they were named after the harpies of Greek myth. But then they were actually found in their own genus now, I believe, so since 1816. Be quite cool. So the harpies were like the head of a woman, but they had the wings of a bird, talons as well, and they would bring souls down to Tartarus. Be really, really cool. I love harpy eagles. So you can see the underside of their kind of harpy eagle is kind of covered with, slant black feathers, but the undersides are mostly white. They have a broad band across the upper breast that separates their grey head from their white body. And the head is pale and grey, you can see that there. And they are crowned with a double crest. You can see they've got kind of these bands of feathers, and then they've got kind of the darker ones at the top there. You also see the irises are kind of a grey-brown, or grey to brown or red, and their plumage in the male and female is pretty much identical. But what's really cool is their size, so they are considered quite large. So female harpy eagles weigh between about 6 to 9 kilograms, or 13 to 20 pounds. With one source suggests there was a large female that got up to about 12 kilograms in captivity. But this may be just been fat, so it's kind of hard to tell. But males, in comparison, are much smaller, so between 4 to 6 kilograms, or about 8 to 13 pounds, with the average weight of a male between 4.4 to 4.8 kilograms, or about 9 to 10 pounds, where the average for a female is about 7 to 8.3 kilograms, or 16 to 18 pounds. So that's quite interesting. They also measure about 86 to 107 centimeters in total length, and they have a wingspan of about 176 to 224 centimeters, or about 69 to 88 inches. That's quite interesting. And they are sometimes cited to be the largest eagle, along with the Philippine eagle, being somewhat longer on average, but they weigh slightly less than the Steller eagle on average, so it's kind of, neither here nor there. But they're the largest bird species that resides in Central America, though there's also larger than, some water birds, maybe heavier. The wingspan is also relatively small, so they don't have really long wings, so they have quite wide wings, so that allows them to fly around, in forested habitats, which they're quite adapted to. And the wingspan of the harpy eagle is actually surpassed by some eagles that live in more open habitats, so things like in the Halictus and Equigenuses. But the extinct harpy eagle is actually more kind of ecologically similar because they were both living in, more closed habitats. So it's kind of, living in closed habitats means that having big wings is not a good thing because you got to sneak through, you got to fly through all these dense areas. So having the wide wings does not help. And the species actually is largely silent away from the nest. They do have a melancholy scream, which is also called wispy screaming, or is also quite low pitched. So that's quite interesting. In terms of the habitat, they're relatively rare and quite elusive. So they can be found from southern Mexico down to Central America and can be found down into Costa Rica and Panama. So typically they're most common in Brazil as well. With some exceptions, though, they can be found in Panama and Costa Rica. They're actually nearly extinct in Central America, mainly due to logging, which is a bit of an issue. It also climate change. That they seem to prefer lowland tropical rainforests and may choose to nest within sites with canopy to the emergent vegetation. They typically occur at elevations about 900 meters, but have been spotted at about 2,000 meters up. And within the forest, they hunt in the canopy or really on the ground, and as in perch will kind of look for scout for prey. And they do not generally occur in disturbed areas, avoiding humans wherever possible, but will visit semi-open patches of forest as well. They also can be found on kind of the borders of things like that. And they also have been recently found in areas where high-grade forestry is practiced, so that's quite cool. And they are one of the top predators of the Central American ecosystem, or the Amazonian ecosystem. They have the largest talons of any living eagle, and have been recorded catching prey about half their body weight. They're able to snatch things like tree branches from things like live sloths and other items. Most commonly, they use perch hunting, so they scan for prey and then briefly perch, and then they kind of, upon scouting them, they dive and catch them. Sometimes they use sit or waits. They'll from perch for a long time, hanging out in an area like a river or a salt lick, where often mammals will go and try and find a drink. And on one occasion, they've actually been seen flying within or above the canopy and chasing things, which is quite cool. Recent literature suggests that they eat about 116 total prey species, so they mainly focus on tree-dwelling animals such as sloths, but they also, most of the time, they'll actually feed on brown-throated sloths and Linnaeus two-toed sloths as well, but things like that. But another major prey item for these guys is monkeys, so they will feed on all sorts of different types of monkeys, like capuchin monkeys, saki monkeys, howler monkeys, titi monkeys, squirrel monkeys, and spider monkeys. Those smaller monkeys such as tamarins and marmosets are seemingly ignored, probably because they're not a good amount of food. But species that often would be within the prey range for the species about 1 to 4 kilograms, such as the red-capped capuchin, the tufted capuchin, the white-faced saki, they're most frequently taken. But larger howler monkeys such as the Colombian red howler, the Guanan red howler, and the mantled howler will actually sometimes be prey as well. Also things like woolly monkeys, and spider monkeys, Peruvian spider monkeys and red-faced spider monkeys can be taken by large females and can get to about 10 to 11 kilograms. So some they can take on prey, especially sometimes their body size are a little bigger, so that's obviously good going for them. It's quite brilliant. Let's see if this is one of the babies or the adults. I want to find the adult. There we are. No, that's not what we wanted. See, good on them. And other land mammals may actually be prey for them. So a pair of nesting eagles actually preyed upon things like porcupines and tamandulas and even anteaters, armadillos, nine-banded armadillos, kikajus, coatis, margays, crybaby foxes, and even like in one instance there was a greater grison that was actually killed and consumed by a subadult female harpy. So they can pretty much eat anything smaller than them. So they're not very fussy. And another bird species that they will attack are things like macaws. So they will eat things like a red and green macaws. They'll also feed on curassows and seraimas, and black vultures they've been known to hunt. They'll also feed on iguanas, tegu snakes, and tortoises. So they do have a varied, but they also have been known to been recorded taking livestock, though that's rare. They have been seen taking chickens, lambs, goats, and young pigs. But yeah, they typically will take smaller prey between 0.5 to 2.5 kilograms, or about half their own body weight. But larger females will sometimes risk it and take bigger things, and the biggest prey kind of recorded has been about 10 kilograms, so something that's not too much bigger than themselves. So in terms of breeding, so their ideal habitats, the nests would be fairly close together. In some parts of Panama and Guyana, active nests located 3 kilometers away from each other, and they'll often have a breeding kind of colony of about, or not a colony, but breeding pairs will have about 11,000 acre, 4,500 hectare kind of territory, which they'll have in which they'll lay. They'll have 2 white eggs. Let's say they have those babies while we talk about them. So they'll have 2 white eggs, and lay them in a large sticky nest that can be actually about 1.2 to 1.5 meters across and about 1.2 meters deep, so they can be built over several years. They're often quite high on trees, about 16 to 43 meters in the air, and depending on the status, they like to nest on things like kapok trees or Brazilian nut trees. There's actually no display is known from pairs of eagles, but they do mate for life. A pair will usually raise a chick every 2 to 3 years, but when the first chick hatches, the second egg is ignored and normally fails to hatch unless the first egg perishes. And the eggs incubate for about 56 days, and when the chick is about 36 days old, they can stand and walk awkwardly. And the chick fledges for about the age of 6 months, but the parents continue to feed it for another 6 to 10 months. And then the male captures as much food as he can for the incubating female, and later the eaglet, and then takes shift incubating with the female as the female forages and brings prey back to the nest. Then breeding maturity, so reaching sexual maturity, is not about 4 to 6 years for these guys. And adults can be aggressive towards humans who disturb their nests. So they are considered quite endangered, so they are considered vulnerable, so they're very not common across their range, being a large predator. So while they still occur in a large amount of their former range, their population has dwindled, so they are threatened by things like habitat loss, cattle ranching, agriculture and prospecting. And secondly, they're also considered, endangered by hunting. We'll actually have a look at you since you're sitting up there. So they are threatened by things like hunting, because they're believed to be a threat to livestock or sometimes to human life due to their great size. Although not as actually known to prey on humans, and often rare on domestic site, kind of their large size, and their fearless behavior makes them, a great target for hunters. But such threats apply throughout their range, but there's in large parts where they become a transient site only in Brazil. They've all been wiped out from the Atlantic rainforest, and they're only found in certain parts of, the Amazon basin, which is really sad. But globally, they are considered vulnerable, so they are considered to be a conservation-dependent species. So it means that it depends on a conservated, dedicated effort of both captive breeding, release into the wild, and habitat protection to prevent it from reaching endangered status. So they are considered conservation dependent. The harpy eagle is also considered critically endangered in Mexico and Central America, where it has been extirpated from most of its range. So it is kind of, it's doing okay, but there is areas where they're kind of just not there anymore, which is sad. But luckily there are national initiatives, such as the Peregrine Falcon Fund, has been trying to help with research and helping with breeding and things like that of Harpy eagles. The Peregrine Fund also carried out a breed release project that actually released about 49 birds into Panama and Belize, and it's been going since 2000, so they've been about 25 years, they've been running this study, so that's quite cool. There's also the Belize Harpy Eagle Restoration Project, which began in 2003, which they've been looking at Belize Zoo, and they've been breeding them, and kind of the population has been declining because of all those threats. But luckily, there's been lots of conservation effort, protecting areas where they live, because they need a large amount of habitat. As I mentioned, like a breeding habitat, it's about 11,000 acres of good forest they need to breed and survive. So it's going to protect some good amount of land there. And also introducing them to areas where they are, considered extirpated. Oh, that's not what I wanted to look at. But which is quite cool. So there's lots of, conservation efforts. They're a great poster child for conservation because they're a really beautiful bird. They are such a beautiful animal. But yeah, they've also had a big thing of in human culture as well. They consider the national bird of Panama, and they consider the coat of arms in the Panama as well. And they've also, the 15th Harpy Harpy eagle released in Belize was named Hope, and was considered the ambassador of climate change in light of the United Nations Climate Change Conference in 2009. And the Harpy eagle has been used in things like Fawkes the Phoenix in the Harry Potter series, and has been used to depict the Haast eagle, which is an extinct New Zealand species of eagle, in Monsters We Meet, and is also thought to be sacred to the Quetzalcoatl, which is quite interesting. So yeah, a really, really cool animal. I love a Harpy eagle. Really, really awesome that we're getting now all these cool birds to talk about, and it's really beautiful. It's another mod just knocked it out of the park. So yeah, I think this will be a great place to end the video. So yeah, I really, really want to thank Tosco and Great Case Mod and Good Boy and General Pizza and Monsoon and Nicholas Line Rider. You all done a really, really great job with these. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to get the little bell icon to get notified below anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.